Welcome back to the Vertical Drop Viking. I'm Josef. This is part 2 of our dive into the companies that design and manufacture roller coasters. What sets them apart from one another, what are they famous for, and what you can expect when you're riding one of their rides. If you haven't seen part 1, don't worry, you can still enjoy this video without it. But if you're looking for part 1, I'll put a link to part 1 up at the end of this video. Continuing our dishonorable mentions from the first video, today we have a twofer, both companies for the same reasons. We'll start with Giovanola. While this company has become famous among enthusiasts for being the birthing grounds of the famous Bolliger and Mabillard consulting engineers, the actual amusement ride division of this Swiss steel manufacturing company is a story of repeated embarrassment. Their 3 independently designed coasters are all heavily based on rides that they manufactured for other companies before they became their competition, and rumor even has it that their chain lift failed on their clone of the B&M invert, and B&M had to step in and produce the chain lift, sell it to the park for the ride to function. The ride division went bankrupt in 2001, and after a failure at a power plant they constructed, the metalworking company closed its doors altogether in 2004. The ride experience on all 3 Giovanola roller coasters are similar to the rides they imitate, with the exception of the addition of elements that focus on exerting sustained positive G-forces on their riders. Titan and Goliath are both like any other hypercoaster of their time, and Anaconda a near clone of the Batman ride clones that we'll talk about later. But all 3 rides feature the omission of the model's signature, whether that's several airtime hills or several inversions, and then the addition of at least one large banked helix. These helices are famous for keeping all the blood that's supposed to be in their riders' heads safely tucked away in their feet. Their reputation for making slightly worse versions of already existing coasters is overshadowed today by the Golden Horse Company of China, also known as Jinma Rides, Jinma being Chinese for gold horse. These crooks are known worldwide for shamelessly stealing ride designs wholesale and selling cheap, shaky knockoff versions of them within the borders of China. If they tried to sell them anywhere else, they'd be sued into oblivion. But they continue to operate in China today, with a staggering 8 coasters currently under construction. They've opened a European division under the name Noble Rides, but it has yet to sell a single ride, likely due to the parent company's shoddy reputation. We'll save the last dishonorable mention for part 3, so make sure you subscribe if you want to see more from me. Now, when Giovanola was still manufacturing rides for Intamin, 2 of their top engineers saw the opportunity for money to be made in designing and selling the rides themselves. A whole 11 years before the rest of Giovanola would catch up. Walter Bolliger and Claude Mabillard left Giovanola in 1987 and founded their own company named after themselves, Bolliger and Mabillard, or B&M. This new design company would utilize the new box beam track construction that the pair had invented while working with Giovanola on 2 Intamin rides that are no longer with us, Z-Force and Shockwave. This square twisting beam with 2 support columns would soon become B&M's calling card, and they are known throughout the industry for the smoothness of their rides. When B&M hit the industry, the bar for roller coaster roughness was moved forever. Their first forays into the industry were stand-up models like the ones they manufactured for Intamin under the Giovanola banner, but they soon moved on and began to innovate new ride experiences. Their groundbreaking development of the inverted coaster took the basic concept of Arrow's suspended coaster from the last episode and turned it on its head, quite literally, as their new trains, suspended directly from the steel tubes on their signature square beam track, was capable of performing multiple high-speed inversions. Their prototype for this model would be purchased by Six Flags and themed as Batman the Ride, and has become one of the most cloned roller coasters in the country. They were very successful in both selling these clones and in offering parks custom layouts of the inverted model, such as Raptor at Cedar Point and Alpengeist at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. After the success of the inverted model, they entered the multi-looper market in 1993 with Kumba at Busch Gardens Tampa. In 1995, they followed this up with Dragon Con in Spain, which marked the first time that the inversion record was broken by a company other than Arrow and by a ride designer other than our old buddy Ron Toomer. 1998 saw the introduction of the dive coaster model with Oblivion, bringing the drop angle competition to its logical conclusion. They entered the coaster wars in earnest in 1999 with Apollo's Chariot, the first hypercoaster from the company, focused on airtime like the hypercoasters before it, but with B&M's signature glass smooth ride experience. This was also the year that they pioneered the floorless coaster train, which would not only feature on many of their multi-loopers from this point on, but would replace most of their stand-up trains as that model slowly went out of fashion. In 2002, they unveiled the Flying Coaster, their answer to Vecoma's Flying Dutchman model, which had debuted the year prior. Seeing as how there aren't any Dutchmen around today, I think it's fair to say that B&M did it better. Their last major breakthrough in coaster design was the Wing Coaster model in 2011, taking inspiration from Arrow's Fourth Dimension coaster and placing all the riders to the side of the track. Now that's not to say that they've stopped innovating, as in 2023 they revived the stand-up coaster model for a whole new twist in the Surf Coaster prototype, now operating as Pipeline at SeaWorld Orlando. With such a staggering catalog, it's impossible to boil down the ride experience of a B&M coaster into just a few words. Most of the rides can be described as graceful and deliberate, particularly the multi-loopers and the dive coasters, but you wouldn't use the word graceful to describe the feeling of riding a B&M inverted coaster. These are pure intensity from start to finish, sending the riders through snappy inline twists, tight vertical loops, and disorienting barrel rolls in rapid succession with little to no filler in between. Wing coasters tend to fall somewhere in the middle of this spectrum, with the traditional wing coaster models focused on large inversions, swooping dives, and near-miss elements, while the newer launched models tend to stay closer to the ground and offer more in terms of speed, lateral g-forces, and near misses with the earth itself. As a general rule, if you're above the track on a B&M, you can expect a floaty experience, and if you're below the track, you can expect a forceful, snappy experience. But these are not hard and fast rules. You can spot a B&M from a mile away with their square spines and impossible-looking support structures, but you can't always know what the ride is going to be like until you strap yourself in and experience it for yourself. Next up, we have Intamin, based in Liechtenstein, which is a small German-speaking country in the Swiss Alps. The other European heavy hitter that made it headway in the 20th century. If B&M's catalog is prolific, Intamin's is just astounding. Intamin started out with humble beginnings, mainly building flat rides and water rides from the late 60s and through the 70s. They entered the roller coaster market in 1979, not with a bang, but with a whimper, as Cedar Point hired them to create Junior Gemini, the kid coaster that still operates today as Wilderness Run. They followed this up with American Eagle, a wooden coaster in Gurnee, Illinois, that I've been assured by locals is still a great ride to this day. They continued to build wooden coasters and kid coasters through the 1980s, but also pioneered the Swiss bobsled style of coaster, where the ride vehicle travels in a chute rather than on a track. Growing up, I always loved disaster transport at Cedar Point, and that was a conversion of one of these old Swiss bobsleds from the mid-80s called Avalanche Run. In 1985, they released the Z-Force Space Diver coaster that we talked about in the last entry, the first coaster to feature Bolliger and Mabillard's box beam track design, and this could be seen as their first proper foray into the steel coaster market. They followed this up with an absolute slew of roller coasters with different designs, from looping coasters to record-breaking but divisive shuttle coasters, to the world's first launched inverted coaster. They had varying levels of success throughout the 80s and 90s with these experimental models. They managed to successfully start a trend with their impulse coaster model, capturing speed and high gravitational forces in a compact footprint and for an affordable price. Intamin was definitely on the way up, but they had yet to really find their niche until 1999, when they debuted Superman Ride of Steel at Darien Lake in western New York. This was their first mega coaster model, their name for a hypercoaster. And while it didn't shatter any records when it came out, it can be looked at as their opening shot that marked their entry into the coaster wars. They continued to build other models, but now extreme speed and huge drops were part of the Intamin catalog, and the industry quickly took notice. Six Flags bought a clone of the first Superman, and a more airtime-focused variant, which they also themed as Superman, and then Cedar Fair got involved. Their contract for Intamin would break 5 world records and become the world's first Giga Coaster. These are intended to take the extreme speed and forces of the hypercoaster to their logical conclusion. Once the 300-foot barrier was passed, B&M and Intamin, and to a lesser degree Morgan, would continue to break each other's records back and forth with larger and larger lift hills. All this time, though, Intamin wouldn't be content to just make one style of coaster and be done with it. After successfully selling their accelerator prototype to Knott's Berry Farm and installing it in 2002, Cedar Fair once again collaborated with them to break records. Take the accelerator model concept and blow it up to over 400 feet. After the Giga Coaster laid the foundation for Intamin's reputation for speed, acceleration, dizzying heights, and intense G-forces, the Strata Coaster capped off the peak. Top Thrill Dragster and the follow-up King Ka took huge technological risks to push roller coasters to new limits. Meanwhile, they had revolutionized their process for building wooden roller coasters, and now machine cut all the wood in the factories before they were shipped out, just like the process of manufacturing steel track and supports, which produce some of the most beloved wooden coasters in the world, such as El Toro at Six Flags in New Jersey. In 2007, they debuted 2 new models of steel roller coaster, the divisive Zack Spin model and the revolutionary Raid Coaster or LSM launched coaster. These Raid coasters continue Intamin's legacy of speed and forces, with magnetic launches and low-to-the-ground layouts, combining the excitement of their launch coasters with a healthy dose of snappy rolling inversions. Now, if I tried to tell you about every kind of ride that Intamin ever produced, this video would be a whole hour long. So I'm going to force myself to move on from the history and focus on what's already been briefly touched on. Intamin has many faces and is every bit as innovative as Aero was, but their real calling card is about going faster than the other guy. Whether you're also getting to that speed faster than anyone else, or if you're using that speed to spin around like you're taking a ride in a dryer, or if you're just going way, way up into the air and coming down super fast, Intamin has you covered. Now, Intamin rides are not nearly as graceful feeling as a B&M, but they also aren't janky and precarious like an Aero. Their curves and turns are just as smooth as they need to be and not an iota more, mathematically precise to ensure that the ride experience is safe, but extreme in every way. After those 2 long sections, we can thankfully keep this third one relatively short. Gerstlauer, a German company, began as a parts manufacturer for Schwarzkopf, who I just realized I am going to have to put Schwarzkopf into this series eventually. I'm going to have to find a way to make part 3 a lot shorter, or nobody's going to want to click on it. Maybe I'm going to have to do part 4. Anyhow, after Schwarzkopf went bankrupt, Gerstlauer bought up some of their production sites and went into business for themselves. After finding some success in the late 90s and early 2000s with the bobsled model, they debuted the Eurofighter in 2003. This is a nimble and sleek multi-looper with lots of tight turns in on itself, operating somewhat like a Wild Mouse in that they run single cars instead of trains and tend to have a smaller footprint than a traditional roller coaster. Unlike a Wild Mouse, however, these all feature a vertical lift, a beyond vertical first drop, and multiple twisting inversions meant to simulate flight in a fighter jet or other aerobatic vehicle. They debuted a more extreme version of a spinning Wild Mouse the next year, and since then, for the last 21 years, Gerstlauer has consistently made variations of these 3 basic models. They've made bigger and smaller bobsleds, bigger and smaller spinning coasters, bigger and smaller Eurofighters, Eurofighters with launches, and Eurofighters with longer trains. Now, besides some innovative flat rides, they haven't stepped outside of their lane in a long time. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. You know just what to expect when you get on one of these. If it spins, it's going to spin a lot, and it's going to give more airtime than the more kid-friendly coasters that typically feature spinning cars. If it doesn't spin, it's going to take you up a hill vertically, flat on your back. It's going to rotate you 190 degrees before it flings you toward the ground and makes you feel like you're in the passenger seat of an F-16. In some cases, it's good to know what to expect. That's all for part 2. Come back next week for part 3, and if you like watching me yap about roller coasters, consider liking, subscribing, and doing all the things that help on YouTube. It really means a lot to me, and it will make sure that you don't miss part 3 in the endless sea of content that is YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. I have been Josef. Vertical Drop Viking out.